This is my indie game, Pearlessential, an artistic enigma I can't seem to escape from. It's also an exploration-focused turn-based RPG, and I'm Ellie. Good to see you. Welcome to the Devlog. Last time, I talked a bit about chests, the wooden ones. Since then, I've been slowly tinkering away at Pearlessential. I also took way too long trying to finalize the script for this video. For this devlog, I want to guide you through a meteorological survey. Let's explore the phenomena of the atmosphere, or at the very least its replication. Let's talk about weather. Yes, good old weather. What kind of dev would I be if I didn't add and some, or some, what other kinds of weather is there? According to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, there are only 3 basic categories of weather, and all the ones under other seem to be wind related. Interesting. Very interesting. Anyway, while we finish boarding, let's go over some background and the safety features of this YouTube video. So, why weather of all things? I'd say there are 3 big reasons I took time to implement a weather system and a bunch of atmospheric visual effects. The first being, weather is good for establishing atmosphere and setting. Rain is super versatile for this. All you have to do is get some storm clouds rolling to make everything seem gloomy. Although, I guess it depends on how you feel about rain in general. But why is that? While I was working on this video, I came across some research which found weather has an observable effect on our moods and mental health. That alone makes weather quite a powerful tool to wield in an experiential medium, but it can be taken further. The second reason I wanted to work on Stratus, that's the nickname I've given my weather system, is that you can use weather for storytelling. Instead of relying on the passive implications weather has on the way we think and experience things, I can be a lot more heavy-handed with it. One good way to utilize weather in a story is through metaphor and simile. Say something good happens to the characters in our story. Explaining it through text is fine and dandy, but I can couple that with some changes to the world using weather. For example, having something good happen in the story while letting God rays rain from the sky really helps sell the feeling that something really good is happening. Although, I guess you could argue this is just applied usage of the first reason I presented, so let's quickly cover the last reason I started working on this. Gameplay, obviously. While I'm covering this reason last, it really should be the first thing you think about if you're adding something to a video game. While it really matters on your audience, my opinion will always be that gameplay is king. But let's avoid that discussion for now. There are many ways to implicate weather into gameplay. Oranos is an old-ass game for an old-ass machine, which uses weather as an expression of power. You're tasked with attacking your opponent with all sorts of weather. As you can see on screen, I'm not very good at it though. You've heard of Mario. You know, the fella in red. A bunch of Mario games like to use wind to blow a wrench into the player's plans. In Mario Golf, you have to factor wind into your shots, while Super Mario Bros. On the other hand likes to use wind to add challenge to your jumps, or even enable maneuvers that wouldn't be possible otherwise. I should take note of that. Finally, most pertinent to what I'm doing, role-playing games love to add weather conditions to their battle systems, which is originally what got me started on this. The Pokemon series, for example, has many weather conditions. Some conditions, such as Sandstorm, do damage at the end of each turn, while others modify the effectiveness of certain moves or Pokemon. This encourages changes in player strategy, which is really important for game design. But that's enough about game design. Surprisingly, this is a video about visuals, so let's get into it. So before I get started on how I made my weather effects, I want to quickly lay out some terms, just so everybody is on the same page. My effects mostly utilize 3 key things, those 3 being particle systems, meshes, and shaders. Every single effect I go over in this video uses at least one of them. So what are they? A particle system is a computer graphics technique meant for simulating particles. The simulations are usually complex and physically based. Particle systems manage the appearance and movement of many things, I guess, according to a set of predefined parameters, although they can be dynamically driven also. Every game engine likes to include something like this for convenience, but you can also program your own if you're goated like that. In computer graphics, meshes are a collection of vertices, edges, and faces which define a shape. It's the information a computer can use to show you something. I mostly use quad meshes, which are simply flat surfaces defined by 4 points. By setting up a mesh in a particle system, I can get it to be managed by the particle system, instead of painstakingly programming the behavior of every instance in every circumstance. Lastly is the secret sauce, shaders, which are instructions fed to whatever hardware is creating the image seen on screen. Shaders are incredibly powerful, sometimes unimaginably so if you've never really dived into them before. Unfortunately, they are witchcraft. You cannot convince me otherwise. When people say computers are modern magic, they're talking about either assembly or GLSL. There's a ton of in between, but I like to speak in absolutes. Anyway, now that I've explained all of that, let's get this video in the air. Flight attendants, prepare doors for departure and cross-check. Let's take a look at the first effect. This one seems pretty simple at first glance, right? You prepare a particle system, set it up to drop some things from the sky, configure it with long, thin meshes, and apply them a texture befitting tears from above. And you're done. Rain. Honestly, it can be that simple, but you're here for how I did it, so let me give you some insight. First, we gotta do something about all that waste. If you have a large level you want to add rain to, you might end up asking the particle system to just spawn rain everywhere you want to see it, at all times. But that's pretty wasteful. Why spawn rain where you can't see it? One of the greatest tips I nabbed from this 80 level article is to attach your atmospheric VFX to the camera, and just spawn particles in a small area that covers what the camera can see. That way, you don't have a bunch of particles dropping all over the place. This technique ensures particles only exist where it matters. Cool, but there's still more waste to cut. If you want to spawn a lot of rain, or anything else with a particle system, your first choice might be to increase the particle count to somewhere around 90,000. This is a choice I urge you not to make. Instead, you can batch your particles together. I mean to literally put all the particles onto a single mesh as a texture. Do you really need each raindrop to be individually simulated? These collated textures easily make a lot appear with very few particles, although this isn't a perfect solution. In exchange for needing less particles, you devastate your GPU with overdraw. Overdraw is a situation in which a computer has to think really hard about how the pixels on your screen look because you've told it a bunch of stuff will influence its appearance. Larger meshes with collated textures overlap each other a lot, and transparency does not help our case. Honestly, I'm not sure which is worse between particle count and overdraw in terms of performance. It's probably some sort of trade-off. But there remains a third option regardless. Just overlay the rain on top of the game once with a canned animation. The only issue this has is a lack of depth, but it's easily resolvable if your game has layers, like the NES did back in the day. My rain effect uses large quad meshes with collated textures, and an overlay. The texture on the overlay and the mesh is created with a shader, this one in particular. Another thing to note about the meshes is that they're billboarded. This is a technique that forces them to always face the camera. Since rain clouds blot out the sun, I tweaked the global lighting in-game to reflect that. Another way to elevate a rain effect is to make things in the world look wet and soaked. I don't really do this for my effect since I'm lazy as heck, but what I do touch on is follow through, by adding rain splashes. These splashes are small quad meshes spawned with a different particle system, and the texture is a flipbook animation I made. The weird part about my splashes is how the particle system is spawning them. Usually, one could spawn splashes with particle collision, but it felt like a hassle to me. Instead, my system spawns some particles randomly near the ground and uses a shader to restrain the appearance to where objects actually are. I think this is a bad implementation, but it does look the part. The last thing my rain effect has is lightning. This really helps sell a stormy feel, and it's a great accessory to the effect. My implementation is super simple. All I have to do is turn on a really bright light source somewhere out of frame for a short period of time. It's kinda silly, but it works. Putting everything together, you get the current implementation of my rain effect. Now that we've covered that, time for Jack Frost to roll in. Snow and rain are very similar. As noted earlier, both fall under the precipitation category of weather. For my snow effect, I started by tweaking the pre-existing rain effect. I still plan to spawn large quad meshes, but I need to change the particle system's behavior. Snow falls slowly, and with less uniformity compared to rain, so I plugged in some different parameters to achieve that. I also needed to tweak the texture. Luckily, the shader I'm using can do that easily. This isn't bad, but I can take it further. Using this really cool setting in Godot, I can desaturate everything, which helps make it feel a bit colder. Another thing I added was frost. I did this by setting up a new particle system, this time emitting medium-sized quad meshes set to face the camera. I've set cloud images as a texture for these meshes and used the particle system to slowly fade them in and out. There is another way to elevate an effect like this, and that's by having your character act like it's cold. You can change their posture, make them shiver, and show their breaths in the air. I haven't really dabbled into that yet, animation is not my strong suit, but I like to keep it in the back of my mind. Holistic and multifaceted approaches to representing something is a good way to make it feel whole. The last thing I looked into for this effect was adding some interactive snow. It was a bit difficult to set up, and you're probably better off if I don't try to explain it. There are some great videos on YouTube about how to make it though, so why don't you check out those after you finish this one. I think that's all I have to say about my snow effect, so let's breeze along to the next one. Okay, my wind effect is really basic. I'm using two particle systems to create it. One spawns medium-sized quad meshes with cloud textures on them, similar to the frost clouds I created for the snow effect, but with different spawning behavior to better depict wind-blown dust. The second particle system uses trails, which I learned how to create thanks to this video. These two effects let us see the wind, but it can be further emphasized by having the environment react to the wind. Some of the larger foliage in pearlessential has a basic sway shader applied that makes them move back and forth. Adding flags and blowing cloth can also help sell the virtual air pressure differential. Movement is a really good addition to any scene really. Small and continuous motions go a long way in creating something that feels alive. I don't have any tips for extreme wind effects at the moment, so let's just keep it moving. Although, I can barely see ahead. Alright, you guys got me. I have a confession to make. The frost I showed off while talking about snow earlier in the video, it was actually this fog effect, tweaked a bit to look the part. Yeah. Same with the dust I mentioned during the wind section. It was also this fog effect, tweaked a bit to look the part. I actually came up with the fog effect very early on and realized it's super good as an accessory effect. Heck, sometimes I even have it appear as mist when it's raining. I know. Unbelievable. Unfortunately, there is a deeper and much more sinister side to this confession. I usually describe the effect as cloud textures on medium-sized quads, but I've been using a shader to distort the texture and add more motion to it. Everything you knew about my frost, dust, and mist has been a lie. I'm so sorry for deceiving you guys this entire time. But yeah, that's the gist of the fog effect. It also stays on screen much longer than its variants, and the meshes spawned vary a lot in size. But otherwise, it's pretty simple. Now that I have that off my chest, is it just me, or has it gotten a little hot in here? This phenomena has other names, such as heat shimmer. Wikipedia classifies it as an inferior mirage. It seems to occur thanks to a mass of heated air, and it's very useful for portraying heat. You see it a lot in films when the setting changes to a desert or some other blistering location, and it's perfect for games too. This is my heat haze effect. Unlike rain, snow, wind, or fog, this effect doesn't use a particle system or meshes really, just some pure 24-karat shader magic. Specifically, this effect is using a post-process shader, which is applied to the scene as a whole. Think of it like applying an Instagram filter. The shader reads the screen and then redisplays it with distortion near the top and bottom. It looks a bit weird if the player moves around, but I'm choosing to ignore it for now. You might also be able to tell that I boosted the scene's saturation by a ton, which helps the scene feel warmer. Pretty cool, right? Wait, no. We've gone over quite a handful of effects already, but the flight still isn't over. The next few effects I plan to talk about are less weathery and more environmental. I think they'll interest you nonetheless though. Please, keep your seatbelt fastened as we complete the last leg of our journey. It's finally time to tackle the sky. But pearlessential is a top-down game, and I don't plan on rotating the camera anytime soon. While there's no point spending time creating a dynamic skybox filled with pretty clouds and HDRI textures, even top-down games can express the sky. Let's start with clouds, specifically their shadows. I'm starting with a humongous plane mesh. On it, I'll apply a shader that uses noise to partially dissolve the mesh and create holes in it. Then, all I have to do is place the mesh above the scene to obscure the global lighting, just like real clouds do. Motion is added to the effect by scrolling the multiple noise textures used to dissolve the alpha in different directions. One other thing to note about the cloud shadow shader is that it uses world position instead of UV, so it's not obvious the clouds are parented to the camera. UV is a coordinate reference used when writing shaders to refer to positions along the surface of an object. Instead of sampling the noise textures using the surface position that's relative to the mesh, we can calculate the mesh's surface in relation to the entire world, hence world position and why the clouds don't look horrendous while the player moves. Clouds and cloud shadows are really neat effects, and honestly, one of the first things you should consider adding to juice up the look of your game. Actual clouds are a bit complicated, but shadows can be pretty simple. As you see, I quite literally put an ugly mesh in the sky, yet it works just fine. Speaking of things in the sky, even though the player can't directly look at the sun, we can express its presence with God rays. Yeah, I took the time to add those too. This is a well-known effect, and there are many ways to tackle its production. I could use a post-process shader, kinda like how the haze effect is set up, but it doesn't work very well if the player can't look at the sun, so instead of that, I began considering using volumetric fog to scatter the light and create some God rays. Sadly, just like the post-process shader, it only really works with the sun in view. So, how did I make these God rays? I faked it, of course. For a more stylized effect, especially the type found in 2D games, I don't have to wrangle with physics and math to calculate light scattering. I can just draw a shape that originates from the sky and overlay it on the scene. It's really that simple, although I complicated it a tiny bit. My God ray effect uses some skewed cone meshes. The light ray textures I've applied to them was created with a shader. The whole assembly is spawned with a particle system. Nothing too new here. The fancy part is that the shader I've applied to the meshes reacts to light. That way I can sort of prevent my God rays from appearing out of place. I quite like the look. But there you have it. That's how I added rain, snow, wind, fog, heat haze, cloud shadows, and God rays to my indie game. Phew. Now it's finally time to begin our descent. Don't worry, I'm quite the pilot. Hopefully this wasn't too boring. The weather effects in Pearlessential are a great addition to its visual style. I can also control how heavy they are, so even the same effect can be displayed with some amount of variation. I plan to use the effects in both the battle system and the general game environment. I quite like how they shake up the look of things. You'll have to wait a bit longer regarding that battle system video though. For some reason, I can't stop reiterating the mechanics over and over. I'm open to feedback and suggestions as always, for both the weather effects I've shown you in this video, as well as the game in general. And don't hesitate to ask any questions either. I skimmed out on a lot of details. In the description, you can find some checklists that summarize the sections in this video, and note the parts making up my weather effects, including some of the parts I skipped out on, but you might choose to consider in your own creations. You can also find some other nifty links down there, including one to Steam, where you can now wishlist a game if it tickles your fancy. The support really means a lot. Weather is a really fun topic to talk about, but I think that's all I have to talk about for today. Welcome to the end of the video. The local time is T3600. On behalf of the entire crew, I'd like to thank you for watching. Please, use caution while opening the overhead bins, as their contents may have shifted during runtime. Watch your step, and don't forget to subscribe. Until next time, see ya.